This episode is brought to you by Crimpd. This is the best app I have seen when it comes to self-coached training for rock climbing. Crimpd has dozens of workouts crafted by world-class climbers and coaches that focus on all different facets of climbing performance and training, including workouts to guide your outdoor climbing, which is right in line with today's episode. I just did a fun collaboration with the guys at Crimpd, and now all of you can try my 3 favorite outdoor bouldering workouts right there in the Crimpd app. We've got one called Steven's Outdoor Bouldering Warm-Up. That's my go-to warm-up on a bouldering day. We've got Steven's Outdoor Limit Bouldering, which will guide you through my approach to projecting hard boulders. And finally, we've got Steven's Outdoor Strength Bouldering, which guides you through a strength-focused bouldering session. I've used that one a lot in Hueco Tanks over the past few years with great results. And it's a great format for sending some of those second-tier boulders and building some strength out there on the rock. So check them out. Check out the Crimpd app at crimpd.com. That's crimpd.com to get started. Download the Crimpd app for free and type in Steven, Steven, into the search bar in the app to try my go-to outdoor workouts. That's crimpd.com, or find the Crimpd app in the App Store. Type Steven into the search and have fun out there on the boulders. This episode is also brought to you by Rhino Skin Solutions. These guys are my go-to when it comes to taking care of my skin, and my go-to products are as follows. I love the repair cream. That's the one I use the most. The performance cream and the dry spray, I use those when I am climbing in warm or humid conditions. I have naturally sweaty skin. I find the performance cream and dry spray super helpful when I'm sport climbing, especially because it's really taxing to stop and chalk up when you're climbing a hard, steep, pumpy sport climb. Whether you have naturally sweaty skin like me or dry, glassy skin, maybe you're one of those people who's on the other end of the spectrum, Rhino Skin Solutions has products that are designed just for you and your skin type. So check it out. If you want to level up your skin game, head over to rhinoskinsolutions.com and enter code NUGGET at checkout for 20% off your next order. That's rhinoskinsolutions.com. Use code NUGGET at checkout for 20% off and start taking better care of your precious skin today.
Hello, friends. Welcome back to the Nugget Climbing Podcast Fundamental Series. This is not your host, Stephen Dimmitt. This is Jesse Firestone, but I am here with Stephen Dimmitt. Today, we're talking about how to structure your climbing year. Steve, you had a banner year in 2021. You sent your first V11, and then you sent 2 more V11s, so that's pretty good.
Thank you.
What made that year so good, and how did 2022 compare?
Thank you. First of all, 2021 was my best year of bouldering for sure. Yeah, and I think I'm appreciating that more and more as time goes on, which is kind of a fun thing. I'm going to answer your second question first. 2022 has been unsuccessful compared to 2021, and I'm aware as I say that out loud that it's not all about the send, and it's not all about sending a new grade and having those kind of standout milestones in your climbing career. Those aren't necessarily the things that make a year great, right? I've learned a lot this year. I've invested a lot in some things that really stretched me to grow, and I don't think I would necessarily change much. But yeah, 2022 has been a lot less successful than 2021, and it is because I didn't structure my year in as thoughtful a way. Like I didn't line things up, and that's something that I have a lot of tips around. I think in this conversation is 2021. I just lined things up really well without even necessarily really meaning to. But summer and fall specifically, I had wrapped up some sport climbing in the spring, and then I had a 6-week training block. Steve Maish was helping me, and I just climbed on a board basically for 6 weeks. Had a week off, a little deload, went to Rocky Mountain National Park, and was planning to just be there for a couple weeks, and just loved it. Just got immersed in it and had like this really natural progression of starting with a few weeks of getting acclimated to the altitude and the style and just falling in love with the area and doing a bunch of really fun moderates and feeling really confident and having that confidence grow, and then leading that into, oh, there's some really cool hard things here that I want to invest some time in. So let's give that a try. And I changed my sport climbing plans, or canceled my sport climbing plans rather, for the fall, and just stayed in Rocky for 2 months.
That's cool.
And then kind of rode that wave and came back to Leavenworth. So I did my first 2 V11s in Rocky, and then came back to Leavenworth and did another one that I tried over the summer. So
it's kind of a mix of good planning, but also a little bit of like nurturing your motivation.
Yes, a mix of both of those. But I think the main takeaway from that chapter and those 2 seasons is kind of my main theme that I want to talk about in today's episode, which is the focus tends to produce excellence thing. You know, that's a Tom Randall quote from one of our podcasts together that I want to talk about later as well. And that's a perfect example of how that played out, or how that can play out. I just gave myself enough time, you know, to kind of prepare, and then to ease in and transition, and then to peak and perform and kind of ride that wave. In 2022, I think I've just bounced around too much. Gotcha. And my preparation hasn't matched the thing that I then went and did. You know, for example, I had a really successful block of training this summer, probably more successful than last year. But then I went to 10 sleep for 6 weeks, and it just didn't really feel like any of the training applied. You know, I spent a whole month just feeling like a sport climber again. And it was a fun trip. And I sent a lot of, you know, for me, kind of moderates to semi-hard routes, and it was great. And then I was hoping I could combine the two, you know, the training over the summer with the fitness from 10 sleep, and come back to St. George and try to climb a 514. And it just, you know, it didn't work that well.
Right mix.
It wasn't the right mix.
Yeah.
So I think the theme is just kind of a little bit too much, almost too much variety, or too much switching to, you know, at too quick of a rate between bouldering training and sport climbing, and then a different style of sport climbing.
Right. Not
really getting that consistency that I personally need to really reach a peak performance.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
I think it's important to notice, this is kind of close to one of my tips, but to notice something like that, like, okay, I did this board climbing phase, and then I went to 10 sleep and had like a sport phase, and then I went on like a sport projecting kind of trip, and that didn't work like ABC. So like, what would I change? You know, would I change out one of those blocks, or change out both of those blocks next time? Like, it's kind of important to learn from those mistakes. Mm-hmm. And I guess that sounds obvious, but that's like basically what we're talking about today, is trying some set of things in a certain order, and then kind of figuring out if that order was, you know, got you the results that you wanted to get, and then hopefully in future seasons and future years, putting it together in a way that works. So like, now, you know, it might be better to go to Rocky after that board climbing phase, you know, if you want to boulder, and then if you want to go do this project in St. George, you need some other different approach.
Right.
Then you can kind of be creative and figure out what that is.
Exactly. And when I think back, the same thing's true with, you know, sport climbing. When I think back to my 213Ds, all of my climbing leading up to that was sport climbing. And if I was training, it was, you know, a couple month break to level up my strength after like a year of sport climbing. And I was able to apply that to my projects pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But it took a month or two of sport climbing again to really bring all that together. And I was living at Smith and climbing almost exclusively in one style. So
yeah,
that's the theme for me is, you know, and every single person is different. You don't have to plan your entire year around one thing, but that's a big takeaway for me personally, is if I want to do something really hard and level up, I really need to plan at least a big chunk of my year around that and line everything up.
Yeah. And probably a more general takeaway from that is just that making raw strength gains, it's a lot easier to apply those to bouldering, I think, than it is to apply them to sport climbing.
Yeah.
Just because there's so much more between the strength and the application to the wall in sport climbing than there tends to be in bouldering. In like really high-end bouldering, that's less true. But, you know, for the majority of the bell curve, if you go get strong in the weight room, it's going to come back to bouldering a little bit easier than it's going to come back to sport climbing. So that may
or even on the hangboard or moonboard, I think, too.
Yeah, to an extent, for sure.
To an extent. Yeah. What about you? It seems like you're it seems like 2022 was a really standout year for you, and we can talk about, we're recording this on January 7th, and we can talk about the last week as well. But does it feel like a standout year for you? And what would you attribute that to, if so?
I think I sort of changed my whole philosophy a few years ago, and I started really focusing on the things that seemed really important and building my whole year around that. So that's like why I find this topic so interesting. So I chased very different things in 2022 than I did in 2021, and I consider them both to be like super amazing years of climbing for me, but just for different reasons. Like 2021, I did those 2 high balls that we talked about on the main Nugget episode. 2022 was more just about like hard climbing for me, and I got to expose myself to like a level of bouldering that I haven't tried as much in the last few years. I just haven't been projecting that much. And it was successful on paper. I'm like really happy with what I did, but also, Instagram doesn't get to see the like whatever 15 sessions where I like didn't send the thing or whatever. So there was a lot of that in 2022 too, and that kind of colors my perception of it. But on paper, it was a great year. I matched my PB Red Point and I matched my PB Flash, which for me is really good.
Yeah.
It's hard to hit the next grade at a certain point.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So matching is like just as good as hitting I'll be like over the moon if I hit the next grade, but I'm very happy to match it.
Nice. So. Yeah, that's awesome. For people that are listening that haven't been following Jesse on Instagram, he flashed Free Willie here in Hueco, a really badass and kind of standout V10 in the area a few days ago. When was that?
Yeah, a few days ago.
Yeah. Congrats, man.
Thank you.
Yeah, I climbed it so smoothly, so well. It was really fun to see.
I know that doesn't count as 2022, but in my head it's part, or I guess it's just like a really good start to 2023.
Nice. There you go. Yeah. I want to ask you this because you just kind of gave us this, you dangled this really enticing carrot. If you had to really briefly, like in a sentence, summarize how you changed your approach a few years ago, how would you describe what you were doing before versus now? What changed?
Fear of death made me take opportunity cost very seriously.
Okay.
You said a sentence. So. You just can't try everything on your list. I realized at a certain point, the list of things I wanted to try was way, way longer than I was ever going to get to. And I started seriously going like, what is the one thing I want to do this season? What is the one thing I want to do next season?
You got way more focused.
Yeah. And I love that Tom Randall quote that you dropped earlier, because I think that totally applies. I basically, in 2021, I always have physical goals. I think that's legit. But in 2021, I was like, I'm going to do what turned out to be the monk, and I'm going to do what turned out to be imposter syndrome. Every other thing I did was like something that I came across and decided to try to do. But the only 2 things that I like dedicated myself and my training to were really those 2 high balls. That's like all I cared about. 2022, I was basically like, I'm going to try to climb V12 this year. That's what I'm going to try to do. And that's what I tried to do.
Got it.
And I put quite a bit of work into climbing V13 as well.
Gotcha. So that's awesome.
But that wasn't like a on paper goal.
For people that want to hear more about the monk and imposter syndrome, those 2 high balls that Jesse did, definitely go back and check out his full episode. If you haven't, I believe it's episode 126, right around there, if that's not quite right. And I'll link to it in the episode description for this fundamentals episode. Tips. Should we dive in? How many tips do you have, Jesse?
I've got 3 and then a short one.
Okay.
So 3.5.
I've got 5 tips and 3 pitfalls. So right. I will kick things off here. First tip for how to structure your climbing year. This is super obvious, but a lot of people don't do it. Write out a rough plan for your year. I think
structure your climbing year.
Structure your climbing year. Just write it down.
Just do it.
Brainstorm it. It can be on in a little notebook. It can be messy. It doesn't need to be perfect. You don't need to stick to it either. I think that's something that keeps people from doing this, is feeling like, well, this is going to be too restrictive, too robotic. It's not going to leave room for spontaneity and for listening to my motivation. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about planning out all 52 weeks of your year. I'm talking about just taking a calendar or writing out the months and really roughly kind of drafting out chunks of time. When are you going to have an off season? When are you going to have time off? Are you going to have full time off? When is that going to fit in? Are you going to have an off season where you're more focused on strength training or base training, or kind of addressing some of those weaknesses that aren't getting addressed during the rest of your climbing season? periods of fun or volume climbing, periods where you want to perform really well? Do you have a trip on your calendar? Just get some of those basic building blocks or blocks into place. And then just seeing that visually can be so helpful when you start to think about how things lead into one another, how you're going to build up towards that peak performance or towards that trip, things like that.
So I have a Google sheet that I like as a template that I use, and I can give you a link so you can share it.
Oh, perfect.
Notes for this.
Yeah.
It's basically like each row is a week, and then you can kind of work backwards. Like, you put the date in for whenever you want the year to start. It could be January 1st or whatever. And then you just sort of work backwards of like, I know I'm going to take these weeks off. I know I'm going to be in Kalymnos in this week or whatever, and you can kind of fill in from there, like what phase you want to be in and all that stuff. Hopefully after this conversation, it'll make a little bit of sense how to use that, but I'm happy to share it just so people have an idea of how I do it with my clients.
Nice.
But even just a whiteboard or like brainstorming would be fine. You don't have to do a whole year. You can just do a couple months at a time. I think it's nice to do a year just because that's how humans plan things. But yeah, even planning a few months ahead will get you really far.
Totally. And again, like the most obvious way to do that is to start with the prime season at your local crag and kind of plan around that, working backwards, or the trip that you're going on or the competition or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I think that's a good way to structure.
Yeah, it's pretty similar to my first tip, so I'll just kind of add some of my bullet points here. You don't have to plan out every week. You just want to figure out the major phases. Like definitely, don't try to lock down like every training hour for even in like the next month. You don't need to know every single hour of training that you're going to do. That's okay. You definitely don't need the whole next season, right? It's okay to work like 1 or 2 weeks at a time as long as you generally know what it is you're trying to work on and like what stuff you're going to be doing. I think adding too much detail too early doesn't leave room for things to go sideways. Yeah, you can color in the rest as you go, basically. So
nice.
You should do another one because I have fewer than you.
Okay. My second tip, this happens at the end of the year. I really like to do this over the holidays as I'm kind of getting into the next year. Reflect and take notes. I think that's probably even more important than planning your year, is reflecting on the last year and taking notes and really giving yourself some time and space to think about and write down what went well, what didn't go well from this past year. And you can do that however you want to do it. You can do it by season, by month. But another thing I'll say with that, I used to do this religiously. I don't have to do it as much anymore because my entire life is now documented via the podcast. So it makes it a lot easier to go back and kind of...
It's not very searchable though.
Right. But I can kind of remember like, okay, when I was talking... Anyway, yeah. I don't do it as much anymore, but I still do it. I still find it really valuable. And one thing that I've learned is really long, detailed, cumbersome notes aren't that helpful. So you can write them all out. You can write a paragraph, whatever you want to do, but then take another chunk of time to sit and reflect on those. Try to distill things down to what worked, what went well, what didn't go well, and then summarize it in bullet points that are really, really concise and really easy for your future self to come back and review and get some value out of.
Totally. Yeah, I think the way I think about it is the more specific the information is that you're trying to save for later, the more detailed you want your notes to be. So if it's like you try to boulder and you're going to write down like information about the moves, or like what methods you tried or how, I need to remember to bring this other shoe or it goes in the shade at 1:30 or whatever, all that detail is like really useful for that boulder. But in terms of like thinking about your climbing as a whole and the year and stuff, yeah, you don't really want more than a sentence for a given day. And even if it's just like tired, if you scroll through like several days and it's like tired, felt tired today.
Yeah.
Kind of felt sick. Like, okay, things are going off the rails. Like it's time to, whatever you were training at that point wasn't really working.
Right. I mean, something I would even do was look over the course of my year and then make myself like no more than 10 bullet points. For example, I kind of tried training this way over the summer. This thing seemed to work well. Do this again. I took the time to build fitness and spend time on rock before I tried to send my 13D project. Do that again. That went well. Or whatever it is,
Nice.
Just some of those like really actionable kind of global takeaways, those big lessons learned. I think that's really helpful.
Yeah, so I have a very similar tip, which is to keep a daily journal. And I talk about this on every podcast appearance. It's just important for being a functional human, but it's really important for being a functional climber, I think, because you just lose so much, or at least I lose a lot of stuff if I don't write it down. It just disappears. And I think it's true of a lot of other people too. So sometimes the climbers I work with, they don't have like their own journal, but as we start working together, they start filling out the system that I use for their workouts and stuff. And then now suddenly they have something they can look back on. So some of the people I've been working with for like over a year, they have like tons of information about what they were training and how it felt, and they still have access to all that stuff. I think that's super useful. And then a few other things. I do try to sit down like every season, especially like after a pretty intense phase. If I'm going to a rest period and I know I'm going to be sitting around wishing I was still climbing, I'll like go back through all my notes for that season and kind of try to put together like an idea of what I did right and what I did wrong, So like I'm wrapping up 6 weeks in Hueco. I'm definitely going to like take notes on what I would do next time, for my skin and my fatigue and work capacity and the things that I noticed, and that I would try to bring to the table next year a little bit more prepared.
Yeah.
And then one other thing that goes with that is I really like to celebrate my successes. And maybe this is part of why I feel like all my years have been good years lately. I'm not sure. But at the end of the year, I sit down and I try to figure out what my top 10 climbing experiences were of that year. And they don't have to be sends. They could be great. Like, on this day, I went to like a new crag with my friends and I climbed like a bunch of sweet moderates, Yeah. Like sometimes that's a top 10 for me. So maybe that's why I feel like really positive and
Did
wholesome.
You just do that for 2022?
Just a few days ago, yeah.
That's so cool. Yeah. I really like that. I'm going to do that.
Yeah, it's a totally worthwhile experience, especially if you climb outside a lot, because part of what makes me feel so good about it is how hard it is to narrow it down to 10. I like look through my logbook and I'm like, whoa, damn, like I did a lot of cool stuff this year. If you climb outside a lot, you might be shocked at how many things you've done. Maybe that's just me. I like mileage.
That's awesome. I want to ask a couple questions touching on some of the things that you just shared. The journaling thing, I think that's great. I agree with that completely. I'm just asking this coming from a place of noticing or thinking about the pain points that I've ran into over the years of journaling. Sometimes it feels like I'm writing the same thing every day. Sometimes I get bogged down thinking like, am I ever actually going to come back and look at this? It's overwhelming to think of coming back and looking through all this stuff. What do you try to include? How do you focus the daily journaling in a way that makes it feel helpful, useful, productive?
I don't worry about it.
Okay.
Yeah, I just write stuff down. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. Sometimes I skip a week.
Okay.
It's fine. If I go back to look at what was going on and I skipped that week, it's like fine. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not that big of a deal.
Do you go back and review periodically?
Yeah, like once a season I go back and I look at all the notes I took.
Okay.
And if I'm really busy with climbing, like I have been here, right? The days are pretty long and you're pretty taxed and I'm like working too. So, if I notice that I haven't done it in like a week, I kind of make a mental note like, okay, I need to sit down and write down those days before I forget. Even if it's just like, okay, I had a big day on West and then we took a rest day and we like went out to a new taco restaurant. Next day, my stomach felt kind of weird in the morning. Had a big day on North, felt kind of terrible. Yeah. You know what I mean? That could be, if I'm doing it retroactively, that might be all it is, Yeah, I don't think I worry about it too much. I sort of just let it be intuitive.
Okay.
Cool. When it comes to actual training, then I'm writing down my sets and reps and load and stuff. But that's not a journal. Yeah. That's your like training log.
It's kind of funny when you said journal, I was like, oh man, I've really gotten away from that. But then as you just shared everything that you just shared just now, I was like, what am I talking about? I keep a training log all the time.
Yeah.
It's not a journal. I don't sit down and write in a notebook or anything, but something I've been doing for the last couple of years. This works really well for me because I don't like the feeling of being obligated to write a bunch of stuff every day. I don't know where that feeling comes from. It's obviously coming from myself, but having a physical journal just feels like one more thing on my to-do list, and I don't like that. What I've done, which I really enjoy, and I'm continuing to do this, I think it came from that first interview with Steve Maish that I did like a year and a half ago, but I just keep a calendar. So I have a Excel sheet where I just plug in a, free calendar template, and then I just fill in the days with what I did. And so within the cell of that day, it's a really brief note. But then if I want to add all the specifics, I just add like how you can add a note on Google Sheets, a comment. Yeah, exactly. And just write as much as I want to there, sets and reps and things like that. And then this is the part that's been really helpful. Then if it's a climbing or training day, I color that cell either green or red. And that way...
Christmas.
Yeah. It's Steve's plus minus thing. I have to give it either like...
Oh, I thought you were saying like climbing was green and training was red or something. I understand now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So if it's...
I was being a dumbass.
No, you're fine. If I did some sort of training or climbing, it's either a plus day, meaning it went well. I felt good. I, performed well, whether that was a new PR or felt stronger or climbed well on the project, even if I didn't do it, whatever it is. Just felt good, performed well at whatever it was. That's a green day. If I felt kind of trashed, run down, that's a red day.
Right.
And, rest days are white. I just leave them colorless. And then being able to just see that visual. Like if I have 2 weeks of mostly reds, I'm like, oh, I fucked up there. Let's back up a week or two and see what I was doing leading up to that. Oh, I wasn't taking any rest days or not enough rest days or whatever it is.
It's funny that I didn't understand what you were saying because I do the same thing with my clients. It's just it's just 1 to 5 and I have like a formula that colors it like on a green to red gradient.
Amazing.
Yeah, and I do the same thing for my when I'm like weight training and stuff. I'll do the same thing, but when I'm out here in a place like this, I don't. But I will share one more minor thing while we're talking about journaling forever, which evidently is an important part of structuring your year because we're talking about it a lot.
Yeah.
I use Google Keep, and
I don't know what that is.
It's like a notes app.
Okay.
And you can just create notes, and then it's just very searchable and indexable. You can like hashtag things and you can search for like keywords or hashtags. So I just use #log and I write the day's date in there. And that's like the title of every note. So today would be like 1/7/23 #log. And then when I want to scroll back through, if I just look at the log hashtag, I have all my notes in like reverse chronological order. So I can just scroll down until I'm wherever, which now that I've been doing this for a while, I have to scroll pretty far. I should probably start tagging the year. But you can also search for a specific date. And I think it's sort of nice for the logging thing, but it's really nice if you have an injury or a tweak, because I tend to get the same little tweaks over and over. And something that's reassuring to me is to go back to the last time it happened and look at the number of days before I was like back to normal and just be like, oh, nice. It took me like 5 days to get over this last time. I'm going to be fine. Which maybe that's like a...
No, that makes perfect sense. Yeah.
It helps. Great. It helps my anxiety for sure. All right. Nice. Next tip.
My turn again. Okay. Tip number 3 for me is give yourself time to transition between disciplines. If you are a climber who enjoys pursuing multiple disciplines, that's definitely a big reason why 2022 was not as successful as 2021 for me. 2021, I spent a lot more time bouldering. I did some sport climbing, but it was kind of here and there and mostly focused in the spring. And 2022, I tried to bounce back and forth between them a little bit more frequently, and that just didn't work very well. Yeah. So a big lesson for me in 2022 is that it takes me like 3 to 4 weeks if I haven't been sport climbing to feel like a sport climber again, or to ramp up to, trying a V11 if I haven't been bouldering outside consistently. And if you only plan a 6-week chunk, that just doesn't give you any time to like actually throw down and do the thing. So, I'm still thinking about how to kind of process all that and carry that into 2023. But to give people an example, we're talking in early January, I'm planning to be in Hueco for another month. And then rather than going back to St. George right before my project comes into condition, I'm going to go there a month early and have a whole month to climb in the Hurricane and get some fitness and try to send some 513s and build that momentum.
Smart.
And then try the hard thing. And then going into the summer, I'll have a training block and then crossing my fingers here, hopefully a trip to Rocklands, which I'm very excited about. And then carry all of that volume and doing tons of new climbs, hopefully in Rocklands. Carry all of that bouldering fitness into trying a V12 in the park in September when conditions are really good. that's kind of, I'm not sure yet, but that's how I'm thinking about the summer and fall already for 2023, and kind of lining things up. So
yeah. It's at this moment that I'd like to acknowledge how lucky we are when we get to think about things like
totally.
using Rocklands as
it's probably nauseating for a lot of you. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've dedicated our lives to this. I don't feel bad about it necessarily, but we are lucky.
We are lucky. Yeah, not everyone can do this. But I mean, you can think about your climbing the same way if you're in the gym, 48 weeks a year or whatever it is.
Yeah. I mean, the important thing that you said, I'm sorry to like have, jumped on you. The important thing that you said was you're taking something that you're going to gain from one phase and you're going to try to use it in the next phase.
Yes.
And that doesn't have to be labeled with whatever the energy system is that you expect to be training in that time. It's more than just, now I'm going to do capacity. Now I'm going to do strength. Now I'm going to work on my power endurance. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot more going on than just that.
Right.
Primarily the skills that you're focused on.
Mm-hmm.
But I can go on that rant later.
Yeah, well, for me, that's a perfect. You're spot on. For me, it's like I need a month to spend time on slippery, intimidating, overhanging limestone to go into my really intimidating, overhanging, slippery limestone project. So, and there's so many more things than energy systems going on there, like you said. So, yeah, to say the tip again, give yourself time to transition between disciplines. I think that's really important. And we will be right back. This episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. Let's talk about therapy. Have you tried therapy? It's fucking awesome. I go to therapy twice a month through BetterHelp, and it's super, super helpful. I have a lot of supportive people in my life, but nothing beats sitting down and talking with a professional who is there for no other reason than to listen and to help. It's the best. I would literally pay twice as much for therapy. And I'm actually paying full price for therapy right now, despite them being a sponsor of the podcast, which I just realized I should look into that. Therapy is all about deepening your self-awareness and understanding, because sometimes we don't know what we want or why we react the way we do until we talk through things. BetterHelp connects you with a licensed therapist who can take you on that journey of self-discovery from wherever you are. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. You just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists anytime for no additional charge and without any awkwardness. It's super easy. Discover your potential with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/nugget today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/nugget. This episode is also brought to you by LMNT, spelled LMNT. LMNT is a tasty electrolyte drink mix with everything you need and nothing you don't. I started taking LMNT a few years ago because I had cleaned up my diet and started following a mostly paleo approach, and I stopped eating processed foods. And I felt so much better as a result, but the one thing I wasn't getting enough of when I cut out processed foods was electrolytes. Sometimes I would get muscle cramps and have trouble sleeping. And I listened to a podcast that made me think I might be low on electrolytes. So I tried LMNT, and adding just one packet of LMNT per day to my daily routine made the cramps go away. I started sleeping like a baby, and I felt great. Plus, it's super tasty. I really enjoy it. It makes me drink more water in general. It's great. Right now, LMNT is offering you guys, my dear listeners, a free sample pack with any purchase. That's 8 single-serving packets free with any order of LMNT. That's a great way to try all 8 flavors or to share LMNT with a friend. My favorite flavors are the watermelon salt. That's my go-to right now. Citrus salt is super good as well. And I also love mango chili. When I want a little kick, that one really hits the spot. Super tasty. Get yours at drinklmnt.com/nugget. This deal is only available through my link. So again, go to drinklmnt.com/nugget to get your free sample pack with any purchase. drinklmnt.com/nugget. And now, back to the show.
All right, I'm going to phrase my next tip as a question because I think that it will jibe with what you just said.
A question for me?
Yeah, so my next tip is, I'm not going to phrase it as a question, but I'll ask you a question. My next tip is to write down 3 things that you want to work on to be prepared for each phase. So knowing that you're going to go into that lime, I know you're going to give yourself time. So you're going to have a month there to start climbing on slippery limestone. So what are the 3 skills that you're going to like think about the most during that phase?
Yeah, good question.
And I suggest no more than 3. Because really, like, there should be a few things that are really important to whatever your project is.
Totally.
Right?
Totally.
And as soon as you start working on like 6 things, 8 things, 10 things, like suddenly you're kind of stuck at all of them.
I mean, in a sense, I only have like 2.
That's
like,
even better.
Yeah. The main 2 are maybe there's a couple of things here, but just get that comfort back with trying to red point hard, steep limestone sport routes.
Yeah.
You know, it's that there's so many things that are included in that, but that's the thing that kind of summarizes all of it, right?
Comfort with that like emotional pressure of red pointing.
Yeah, the physical and the emotional.
Okay.
You know, it's like spending more time in overhanging terrain on pretty good holds.
Yeah.
It's
See, I think that's
very different from bouldering, right?
That's a perfect example of what I'm talking about, because then now you know it's not something you need to go to the gym and train.
Right.
What actually matters is spending time on the exact like terrain that you're trying to work on.
So let's say that. So that's number 1 is spending time in overhanging sport climbing terrain and getting comfortable with that. Number 2 is practicing red pointing, which I haven't done much of in a sport climbing context, or I should say, which I haven't done much of in St. George in quite a while, because last spring I just tried Joe Exotic the whole season, basically.
Okay.
This is a tangent, but I think it might be helpful for people listening. So I've talked ad nauseum about pyramids on the show. That's something Steve Maish and I have talked about a lot. I found it really helpful to map out a pyramid of climbs that are recent, that are relevant to your current climbing. But something I just did actually the other day, and it was really illuminating, was, okay, I'm going to make a pyramid for the St. George area specifically, because none of my Smith Rock experience really applies all that well. And other areas do too. So this is kind of an interesting way to think about it. You know, you could do like steep overhanging limestone and make a pyramid for that, because rifle's kind of relevant, right? But I just wanted to know, like, how much stuff have I actually sent in St. George, you know, / Vegas. And I made a pyramid of that. And it was really eye-opening. Like, I'm trying to climb 514 in this area, and I've climbed like 3 13Bs and like 7 or 8 13As and a bunch of 512s. And I was like, holy shit, I really haven't solidified that 13 plus grade, or even really 13B in this style. And it's helpful to think about it that way. It helps inform what I want to spend time doing to ramp up. And some of those, you know, like I'd probably get a ton of motivation and confidence from doing a 13C or 2 again, maybe trying a 13D. But more than that, it's like, wow. You know, when I hit the road and started the podcast and all that, I thought of myself as a 13D climber in this sense, because I had all this experience at Smith and I've done however many 513s, but I was like a 13A climber coming to St. George for the first time. So I've actually made a lot more progress than I've been giving myself credit for. So anyway, yeah, that's something that's been helpful. But anyway, I'm way off track. So number 1, get more comfortable in overhanging terrain, to answer your question. Number 2, practice red pointing. Number 3, maintain some of the steep bouldery strength while I'm doing that.
Gotcha.
So that's just like once a week in the gym, you know, maybe hit the moon board a little bit, maybe just do some hard finger training. Keep it short. Don't let that take away from the main thing, but just kind of keep that ticking over so it doesn't backslide too far. Because I know that going into Joe Exotic, like, I need to be pretty damn comfortable climbing that V8 crux in the middle of the route.
Yeah, you got to be strong too. You can't spend that month getting really comfortable and like let your power drop off. So that makes sense for that to be one of the 3 for sure. Yeah, I think it's a useful exercise. And I don't know if you were going to start listing more things, but almost always when I ask people, like, oh, they're going on a trip, and I'm like, what are the 3 things that are most important? They list like 8, you know, because it's really hard to pick what the things are that matter the most. I mean, it's such a complicated sport. Right. But you have to trust a little bit that some of those other things will fall into place, you know? and just sort of like have them in the back of the mind, but really like focus on these things that are the core things. And I think that's something where structuring your year, you're going to get used to this. When you plan that stuff out, you're going to get used to like, did that work? Do I need to change one of the things that I focused on? So for me, like I know what I was thinking about coming to Hueco. Now I know next year, like how I'll tweak that a little bit. So I think that's really, really helpful.
You got another one?
I do. So yeah, let me scroll here. I'll say, I know that we're not talking about making a training plan, but I feel like this fits in and there's nowhere else for it to go in this season. So I just need to get it in here. Your training should really support your climbing. And this kind of gels with what we were just talking about, you know, about how like, rather than training your power endurance, you're going to think about like climbing on the wall on routes and getting pumped, because that skill is like more important and you will automatically work on your power endurance a little bit. Just if 90% of your year is training blocks, then the skills you're working on are mostly training skills, right? You need to leave space in your year and in your training for actual climbing. You should be dedicating most of your attention to actual climbing. And so if your plan is like, I'm going to do these deadlifts and I'm going to do this finger training and I'm going to do this like shit with a kettlebell or whatever. If that's what you're planning out for your year, you're not really thinking about your climbing a whole lot. So like get the climbing piece and the climbing intent on there. And if your intent for the phase is to get stronger, that's great. Then you can go in later and fill in the detail of like what barbell thing you're going to do. But the intent of the phase should be you want to be a stronger climber. That's mostly going to be climbing, right? The barbell thing is going to be secondary to that. And I think it's important that the way you think about structuring your year reflect that reality. Something that's incredibly important in all kinds of sport, and definitely in strength training, and definitely in bouldering and sport climbing, is intent. Like what is in your mind when you're doing the thing? And I think training that intent starts with like knowing sort of what phase you're in and what you're trying to actually accomplish, you know? If like, you know, I'm glad the first thing that popped to your mind for St. George was get that like red pointing brain, right? Because that's an intent thing. I would say that like switch flip when you're about to leave the ground is intent for sure. Yeah, I troll Reddit, you know, the Climb Harder Reddit all the time, and constantly see people on there ask the question, like, please review my training plan. And it's just always like, Mondays I'm going to do these exercises, Tuesdays I'm going to do these exercises, and Wednesdays I'm going to rest, Thursday I'm going to do, it's a list of exercises, you know what I mean? It's like, yeah, but like tell me about your actual rock climbing skills, or what are you doing in them, you know? Right. And yeah, I know that's like slightly tangential to how to structure your climbing year, but I think it's incredibly important.
Totally. Yeah. And I mean, you can bring that same intent to the gym if that's all you have for chunks of the year, you know, like you can have, it's so valuable to have days where you're trying to practice like you play, that whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think just flip the coin a little bit so it's on the other side. Like instead of thinking I'm going to do back squats so that I can take more falls off of boulders, think I need to get better at falling off of boulders, so I will do some squats in the gym or whatever the thing is that you're going to do.
Put the climbing first.
Put the climbing part first, and let the training be informed by that. Don't do it backwards.
That's great.
It'll help you from doing a bunch of random bullshit that's not going to make you better.
Yeah, totally. I laugh because I've done a lot of random bullshit over the course of my climbing career.
Do you have one more?
I've got two more. Yeah.
Okay, two more.
Actually, this is perfect because they're kind of, I'll do them back to back because they kind of connect. They very much connect. My fourth tip, if you want to hit a peak performance, set aside 3 months to build toward that goal. That's a very arbitrary number. It doesn't have to be 3 months, but the point is set aside a significant chunk of time to build towards that goal. And you know, there's so much we could talk about as far as how to increase the specificity and kind of hone in on the thing that you need to do and how to analyze the thing that you need to do and what makes it hard. So with this, again, this is the Tom Randall thing. Focus tends to produce excellence. I think that's so smart. And I see it play out time and time again in the people that I interview. They all do this. And they might focus on different things at different parts of the year, but if they want to do something really hard for them, they plan around it and they set aside a big chunk of time to work towards that thing. So then my fifth tip is, if you haven't already, and this is a plug for myself, go back and listen to my follow-up with Tom Randall. I will link to it right here for this episode, but it's probably one of the most helpful episodes I've ever put out, full stop, if you want to improve at climbing. It was all about how to program your training. Tom was on fire that day. It was such a good conversation. He was so helpful the way he showed up in that conversation, and there was just a ton of really good stuff in there. So
nice.
Yeah, definitely check that out and become a patron so you can listen to the whole thing.
I think I remember that one. I think it was a good one.
Yeah. So yeah, that's all my tips. Do you have?
I got 4 pitfalls.
4 pitfalls. Okay, you should go first.
Okay, well, the most obvious and common pitfall that I see as a coach is people are just winging it. I think I just mentioned this before we started recording, but like I'm kind of shocked at how often it's like a novel concept to people that they plan out their year ahead of time a little bit. I'm not sure why that is, but it seems to be something people don't do. So
it's a thing, because my first pitfall is not having a plan. So.
Yeah, and again, it's like it's really easy to want to overfill it with detail, and that makes it very like anxiety inducing, to try to put a plan together. But you could do this in an hour. It doesn't need to be like, you don't need to go into crazy depth. Just sit down and be like, what am I doing then? Clearly I need to rest somewhere in here, because if you don't have some kind of plan, and we said this in the original episode, it's going to be 24/7, 365 limit rock climbing. And it's not going to work super well. Most people figure this out a few years into their career. You kind of have to have peaks and valleys. It's a lot easier to kind of plan them out a little bit than it is to have them hit you in the face.
If you will have peaks and valleys, and if you do not plan them out, they will happen to you. You will get sick, you will get injured. They just happen. You can't consistently be peaking. No one can.
All athletic performance is a sine wave, right? So when you have these like incredible athletes who seem to just always be hitting it, always on fire, they're just timing when they're trying to do amazing stuff with their peaks, and they're just getting the timing really good. There are always valleys, right? They're just usually off screen, and it's easy to forget that.
Totally.
So yeah, and that applies to normal Joes too.
Nice. Sure. You just shared this, but one thing I'll throw in there again is that sitting down and planning out your year, you're not a slave to this plan by any means. It's just helpful to do the exercise. You can change it, you can tweak it, and keep coming back to the plan. But thinking about things with that intention, I think, is the key here.
So now you got one of my pitfalls.
Oh, really?
Which is not rolling with the punches.
There we go.
Yeah,
let's do it.
In life, and definitely in getting better at climbing, shit is 100% absolutely guaranteed going to go sideways. Like, things will go wrong. You'll get hurt. Half of Rocky Mountain will fall down the mountainside and you will not get to go there in this season. Like, that shit happens, and you'll have to figure out something else. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't have some kind of plan. It just means you need to be ready to deal with it. So the mistake that I see is something didn't work out in these 2 weeks or this month. Therefore, scrap the whole thing and I tweaked my finger. Fuck, like my climbing is over forever. Right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
No, it's okay. Like, just get back, adjust the plan, figure out how to make it work. Like, yeah, I guess just don't underestimate how easy it is to come back from something like an injury, or to adjust your plans and like find a better thing that you could be doing with your time. Yeah, you have to see through as much of the experiment as you can, I think, in order to get value out of it. So
nice. Okay, I already shared my first one, not having a plan. My second pitfall is not taking notes, or not summarizing your notes in a way that's actually useful. Because I've done that. I've done a lot of note taking that was just so comprehensive that I went back and looked at it a year later, and I was like, I'm tired just looking at this. I don't want to read it. I don't want to read all this shit. And that's when I made that shift. I'm like, okay, when I do this, I need to make things really concise so I can actually look back and have really quick takeaways that pop out at me.
Yeah. I wonder if all these like journal recommendations make it sound like we're both really like anal, super like detailed.
I'm not at all
meticulous. Yeah, I'm not either. This is just a habit thing.
Right.
And like I said, if you miss a week or two, it's really not a big deal. But like, do it in a way that makes it easy for you, for sure.
Totally.
It's just more about having the habit.
Yeah. Yep. Nice.
Okay, next one. Not taking a rest phase somewhere, especially if you're in the masters category, I guess is a nice way to put it. I would say like 1 to 2 weeks 1 to 2 times a year, depending.
Full rest?
It doesn't have to be full rest, but I recommend having something else in your life be the priority at that time. So like, I'm in Hueco, I've been here, I'm absolutely haggard. We're going home like day after tomorrow. And the next 2 weeks are like a rest phase for me. I'm probably going to climb on the board a little bit, but it's going to be like a short session. I'm not going to go for it, and I'm tired, so it's going to be easy to not go for it. I have all these other things to catch up on. I want to like spend time with my fiance and my dog and like watch some movies. I'm going to like put other things first before climbing, and that'll make it easy to not climb too much.
Yeah.
Some people do like fully no climbing. And I think that's, the easiest thing is to just time it with life stuff or a holiday, stuff like that. Sometimes I'll like go see music for a few days, and that makes it, I'll always just book that as my like rest. I'm like, oh, I'll just rest 2 days before I leave and 2 days when I get back, and boom, that's a week of rest. Like, or 10 days of rest. Easy peasy.
Nice.
Sorry, one more thing on that before you start.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. I want to emphasize climbing all the V2s in the gym does not count as resting. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
You can't scale back the intensity and then dial up the volume. You have to scale, it all has to come down.
Yeah, and I want to say something there too. Something that I've tried and botched repeatedly many times is trying to apply this, weight training philosophy to climbing and saying, well, it's a deload week, I'm going to go 50% volume and keep the intensity high. That's really fucking hard to do when you're climbing, because climbing is just so much more haphazard and
it's fun.
And whenever I've tried to do that, maybe I keep the session shorter, but I just rapid fire the thing. I just make the density way too high, or
you trick yourself to get away with it.
Exactly. I find some sneaky way to kind of get around it, and I'm trying to convince myself that I'm doing the thing, but I tried to do it in Hueco last year. There was like 2 different deload weeks where I was like, well, I'll just go on this tour and like try this thing a little bit, and I just won't try it very many times. But you pay money, you get out there, you hike all your shit out there, you have all the pads, people are psyched.
Yeah.
It's really fucking hard to do that when you're at the boulder. So, and even like a 6-hour climbing day where you don't climb very much is still like a pretty damn big day most of the time.
I pretty much did that today. I'm exhausted.
Yeah, totally.
I want to go further down the rabbit hole and share a tip that's totally unrelated to the main subject. But
great.
If you really want to keep a session short, so if it's like your rest week or a deload week or something, and you're like trying to reduce the amount of time that you're in the gym, just make some kind of plan for something else after the gym. Go to your partner and be like, do you want to have dinner tonight at 6:30 or 7 p.m. or whatever? And then you're going to be in the gym. You're going to be like, no, I guess I can't try it anymore because I got to pack my shit and go. Otherwise, my wife will be pissed at me. It works really well.
Nice. Yeah.
It's very effective.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you have if you're like planning to go get tacos or to watch a movie or whatever, you have a reason to get out of the gym. People who have like infinite time, those are the people who need the most discipline. People who have limited time, it's just easier for them. Maybe that's why dads get so strong
this week, and that's why dads get so strong.
And moms, of course.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. Constraints, the power of constraints. I've learned that I just don't need to stress it with the deload weeks. Like, don't worry about keeping the intensity high. You're not going to backslide in 1 week. I just think it's not worth overdoing it, not worth risking overdoing it.
Sure.
So these days, I just really try to chill the fuck out. And if I go climbing, I'm like you said, I'm relaxing and not climbing that much, and I'm keeping it to like V2.
Yeah.
And just enjoying like the movement on rock or the views or the conversations or whatever. So,
yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
That's most of the reason that I don't recommend full stop climbing, and I wouldn't do that for myself, is I know that my friends and roommates are going to be climbing on the board in the garage. So I want to be there. They're my friends. So I know I'll climb a little bit.
Nice. Okay. My final pitfall is bouncing around too often. And this is a lesson that I seem to be having a hard time learning. It's hard. It's really hard to balance different disciplines and climb well in two different facets of the sport, let alone more than 2. For example, bouldering and sport climbing. It's hard to feel like you're a good boulderer and sport climber if you're bouncing between them too often, I find. I don't know if this is just me or if this is just something that I've learned that makes sense and is relevant for everybody, but I think it feels a lot better to have 3 to 4 month chunks of each thing and alternate between those and have 3 or 4 different chunks in a year, or even 2 6-month focus chunks versus doing a month of this and a month of that. And that could even be, that doesn't necessarily even have to be disciplines. That could be styles of climbing. That could be rock types. That could be crags. There's so much value in the variety there. But I have noticed that really good climbers who are performing well they tend to really be all in on the thing that they're doing for a while they're doing it. And it's more that they will focus for a few months and then switch modes and go to this other crag and focus there for a few months, but they're not just flitting around between things all the time. So.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. My last Pitfall is kind of similar to that actually, but it's like tweaked. So my Pitfall is putting all of your time or effort or conditions into whatever the like limit thing is, and forgetting to like throw yourself a bone every once in a while. So like, I'm sure that when you're in St. George, like ramping up in that 1 month period, part of the goal there is to send some stuff that's below your limit. And like, hopefully those are fun routes.
Oh yeah.
And you don't lose sight of like enjoying your climbing.
Totally.
Something that I find myself having to like walk clients back sometimes from like, they really want the goal. And I'm like, we'll set some time somewhere in there to like enjoy rock climbing, because projecting is savage. And I know that I probably fall pretty far to the side of like having good experiences versus projecting these days. I probably spend 3/4 of my year just chasing like, 90% instead of 95% or whatever. And a quarter of the year on the like limit stuff. And some people probably are like the opposite of that. They're like 75-25 the other way. But don't be like 100% limit all the time. I think it's really hard to get good that way. And I think people get burned out that way. It's easier to get hurt that way. And if you bake it into your year, if you're like, this is the chunk of the, if you live near a major climbing area and you have cool things to do, like bake it into your year. You're like, I'm going to have my project phase. I'm going to take a 1 week rest. Maybe it's starting to get warm in like late spring, and I'm going to go out and I'm going to do all those sick high balls that I keep talking about and I haven't set time aside for, and it's too hot for your project maybe anyway, or whatever, right? So you could like keep hammering those moves as it gets warmer and warmer. Yeah. Or you could just in your plan acknowledge that it's going to happen and like make space to go do something fun instead. Yeah. I think it's really valuable.
That's great. I mean, I don't know about you, but those, when I do pivot to that, those tend to be some of the more memorable chapters of my year.
Yeah. That's why I started doing it most of the year.
Nice.
I mean, yeah, and I'm a better climber for it. I'm progressing. Like that's the progression zone. I think that's the easy thing to lose sight of. It's right. Everybody loves a limit send, but and you learn a lot from those, but it's not as easy to turn around and put it right back into your climbing, at least for me. I learn way more operating like just below my limit. And then you just keep doing stuff.
Yeah, you just get everybody lots of things.
Starts to see you as the person who sends stuff, and that feels good.
Nice. I'm done. That's all my pitfalls. I just have the summary. Do you have any more?
I don't. No, I'm done.
Okay. Sweet. Well, let's wrap this one up. To summarize or to share my top tips, I have a tie again, just like last time. So I have a tie for first place. First one is make a plan and take notes. That's super simple.
That's already two.
I know. I cheated. They go hand in hand. There's just so much value there.
Yeah.
There's no right or wrong way. Just if you do that, you're already on your way. And then if you want all the nitty gritty details about how to do that, my second one is go back and listen to my follow up with Tom Randall.
Nice.
Yeah. Great. A very valuable episode. And I highly recommend that one as far as programming your training. So
nice.
Yeah.
All right. Mine is focused on the stuff that matters. No more than 3. No more than 3 major goals in a year. No more than 3 major things you're going to try to train in a phase. Keep it really constrained and focus on the stuff that matters. And if you miss something and it turns out that it really mattered, get it right next time. It's okay. But just keep the list short.
Nice. Have you already done this for 2023?
No, it's kind of a rabbit hole, but I'm not setting any goals for 2023.
Oh, right. You did tell me that. Okay. Retroactively, 2022, did you have 3 goals for the year?
I think I only had 2.
Okay.
Hold on a second. Let me pull it up. Yeah. So I had two goals in 2022.
What were they?
To put 5 sessions into V13.
That's a great goal.
Yeah.
Nice.
Process goal. And then to climb the tornado.
And you did both?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. It was a good year.
Good work.
Yeah, thanks. I had some other stuff for like, my, hangs and shit like that, but
Those are the main two.
yeah, those are
Great.
The hangs and all that stuff doesn't really count because I don't really care that much.
Mm.
And that's why I realized that I'm not going to set any of those for 2023. I'm like, my fingers get stronger every year, whether I set an ambitious goal or not. So it doesn't matter.
Wow.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Just keep training.
Well, thanks, Jesse.
Thank you, sir. This has been really fun.
This has been super fun.
Yeah.
And as always, when I sit down and bring intention to conversations like this, I learn a lot, both from my guest, from you in this case, and also from myself, just, being forced to kind of consolidate ideas and articulate them. And I think the structure, putting things into a few tips and a few pitfalls was really helpful.
Yeah.
For me. So
yeah, maybe we can
really
do like
enjoyed
a little fundamentals debrief.
Okay.
Because I learned a lot too.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm excited to get these like typed out.
Yeah.
On a list.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Me
Be
too.
a useful cheat sheet.
Yeah, that'll be great. Let's
Cool.
do it. I'll put that in the show notes. I'll find a place to give that to you guys. Thank you all for listening. And please let us know what you have thought of these fundamental episodes of this first series of fundamentals. It's been really fun for us. Hope it's been helpful for all of you, regardless of what difficulty level you're climbing at or what your goals are, what you're doing. And if you want us to do more of them, we have, like I said last time, a whole bunch of topics written down for a season 2. So we have a potential season 2 coming with another 6 fundamental episodes that are much more focused around training, how to start finger training, how to climb on a board, how to start lifting weights, how to but how to recover psychologically from an injury and get back to climbing hard, and a couple other ideas as well. So yeah, if that sounds exciting, if you want more, let us know. We probably won't do them right away. We'll just...
Are you coming to Hueco next year?
I'm coming to Hueco next year.
I think I'm coming to Hueco next year.
Should we just do yearly fundamentals?
I think so.
Series?
I think this is where this is where we meet and get better at climbing and talk about it. So,
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let us know what you think. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.